Okay, so remember when I said I'd be retiring this channel?
I lied!
Well, not really, that's still happening, but I just got that itch to make a video again. That's mostly due to the fact that an idea from the past that would be a great video subject just suddenly reappeared in my head. I don't even think I mentioned this in the scrapped ideas section of the previous video. So without further ado, let's delve into my problem with Skyrim's factions and how the Thieves Guild fixes it. And before anyone says it, I know Skyrim's Thieves Guild isn't particularly well written, nor is any faction in the game really. And let's face it, that's the way it was in Oblivion as well. Yes, even the Dark Brotherhood, although you either don't remember due to it being so long since you've touched the game, or nostalgia has got you thinking differently. Despite me being a complete Skyrim fanboy, I will easily admit that the joinable factions are kinda, well, laughable. And I'm not talking about the Civil War sides here. Those are at least a bit fleshed out in comparison. No, I'm talking about the classics here. The Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, the Companions, the College of Winterhold. Your core class options are represented here. Maybe under a different name than you're used to, but they're still the same at the core. And while they all have varying membership, locations, aesthetics and more, they almost all share one common flaw. They're boring. Really, really boring. And I'm not referring to quest content here, that's more so subjective. But when you look at them story-wise, there's just no progression to speak of. Nothing changes, they are completely static. Actually, that's not true. The factions here do have progression. Problem is, all of them have negative progression. Almost everyone ends in a worse state than they were when they started. Of course, that's not all that surprising, seeing as this is Skyrim after all. If Oblivion and Fallout 3 are dark comedies, then New Vegas and Skyrim are definitely more bleak slices of life. In no way is Skyrim's writing and setting similar to New Vegas's, but they do have that bleak and depressing tone in common. And I suppose it's about time I gave an example. And what better faction to use as an example than the Companions? It seems like these guys never even got developed past a couple of core ideas, and their line of quests basically set the stage for all other factions to follow. You're almost forced into joining up despite showing no particular skill. You meet their leader, there's some internal bickering, you go questing, and near the end the previous leader is sure to die so that you, the almighty player, can take their place and get a pointless Radiant quest. With that downward spiral in mind, let's take a look at our players here. The leader is Harbinger Kodlak Whitemane, and he is supported by members of the Circle: Vilkis, Farkas, Skjor and Ayla the Huntress. Then there are also 4 whole other low-ranking members if we don't count honorary ones / servants: Torvar, Nyada Stonearm, Attis and Rhea. Only 2 of those are Nords, only 1 gets that fact mentioned as a motivation, and about 0 of them get anything interesting to do. By the way, keep that weird selection of races in mind, as it'll come up again later. And while I'm nitpicking, here's a fun fact for you. Attis erroneously wears an outfit that's actually designed specifically for Hunan Blackskeever. I don't know why, as just giving him the normal height boots seems just fine to me, but hey, he is far from the worst offender here. Let's talk about the outfits of the Circle members for a moment. Kodlak, Vilkis and Skjor wear the appropriate wolf armor, but no one wears the matching helmet, which I feel is a missed opportunity. However, Farkas just randomly wears normal steel armor, which is weird, but not as weird as Ayla's choice of ancient Nord armor. Like, what? Why does she wear that of all things? The only reason I can think of is because it shows some skin, but is that really why? Because I honestly can't think of any other reason. It's not like she doesn't look good in the wolf armor. If the story here is that she got it from looting, still, why? She's the only humanoid NPC in the entire game that wears it, and it has always bothered me. But all the visual oddities aside, was I not giving an example of how static the Companions are? Well, to me, the term static in this context refers to barely any change or any noticeable change. I'll tell you exactly what changes with the Companions throughout their entire storyline. Inside, you will find fragments of Woodrod, the weapon of the legendary Isgrimor, attached to the wall. When you find more fragments, they will also appear here. Now, that's neat. I like that. However, after all fragments are collected, Yorland Greymane removes the pieces and assembles Woodrod again. It's cool that the weapon is now complete, but now the weapon is stuck in your hands. You can do whatever you want with it, hang it in your house, but you can't hang it back up on the wall at your Vaskir. That would just make too much sense, to actually hold this valued artifact at a place where it actually belongs. There might have been a commentary on modern museums in there somewhere, I don't know. So, alright, the guild hall doesn't change much. How about the membership? Well, Skjor dies, and Kodlak dies, and that's it. You take up Kodlak's place, and there are never any new members recruited. The idea can't even be brought up. And that's just, I don't know. I struggle to call the companions wasted potential. Sure, their background is legendary, but nothing about them is interesting. Even the fact that their higher-ups are werewolves is kinda underwhelming. The only good thing is that it can only go up from here. The College of Winterhold. Skyrim's place to learn magic, because if I refer to it as the Mages Guild replacement, I know at least someone would disagree. I suppose that the story here is kinda more interesting. It has a lot of interesting little details involving the downfall of the actual Mages Guild, Talmor connections, racial prejudice, and Psijic monks. Once again, due to the fact that this is Skyrim we're talking about, none of those things actually get talked about in depth, but it's something at least. In terms of members, we're already looking way better with 16 people inhabiting the college itself. There are also numerous affiliated or ex-affiliated members to be found throughout the world, which is also quite an improvement on the companions. Yes, they also had ex-affiliated members, but those 2, or 3 if you wanna count Utgard, just can't stack up against the college members. The college itself though is arguably even more static than Jorrvaskr. The appearance and disappearance of the Eye of Magnus are about the only things that change in terms of objects in the building. And it's just reset back to status quo after the questline ends. I personally don't know what exactly they could have done differently to have some interactivity in the rooms, but we're literally at a magic college. Something creative could have happened, could it not? And while I have your attention, I want to point out that even after all these years, it still grinds my gears that the town of Winterhold isn't built in the same architectural style as the college. That also just doesn't make any sense, and it looks really bad to boot. This time I can actually understand why though. Because it's easier, plain and simple. Reusing the same snowy farmhouse buildings rather than making completely new assets is just easier. Why bother, right? People can make jokes about the college bridge being in disrepair all they want, at least it has some visual flair to it. And when it comes to members, I'm sad to say that we also have regressed back to the same level as the companions. While we start off with 16 people, by the end of the questline that number will be reduced to 13, with you having taken the role of Archmage. At least the game didn't force you to take the role of second in command as well. No, the only member who's probably on his deathbed got put in that role. Completing another questline for Orniel Gain also results in his disappearance from the place, netting a total of 12 people still at the college. That's sad, but it's still better than the companions. Again, plans to get any more students are never brought up. Oh, and all those rumors about the college being a Dunmerhaven, that's also a big exaggeration, seeing as there are a total of 3 present. I really wonder how Bethesda had planned to handle the college originally. If you didn't know, the college is the faction with by far the most content cut from it. We're talking locations, quests, NPCs, items, dialogue, the whole shebang. They have got more content cut from them than all of the other factions combined. And that isn't an exaggeration. And now, finally starting to get the right idea, we have the Dark Brotherhood. While I have never particularly cared for the faction, calling them static would just be plain wrong. But before we delve into the good stuff, why doesn't Babette have any special clothes? Why does Nazir not wear any Dark Brotherhood-like clothes instead of unique but Hammerfell-inspired ones? And why is the male outfit so half-assed? Okay, with the outfits roasted, let's see what we have. When you join up, there are 7 members of the Dark Brotherhood, with 1 additional member appearing at a later date. And for the first time, we also have a reason for this small number of members. Yeah, so in universe, the Dark Brotherhood has been on a downward spiral for decades, basically being on its last legs, with Skyrim's Falkreath Sanctuary being the only real vestige anymore, or at least as far as we know. If the companions would also tell you that recruitment had been slow, then I could kinda give them a pass. But now I can only assume that people don't want to join up due to Ayla's heinous outfit. In the Dark Brotherhood story, things don't go smoothly for, or might I say, nicely varied and characterized crew of characters. And at the end of the line, we're just left with a trio of characters. You, Babette and Nazir. Not only that, but the Sanctuary got ruined to boot. And that's where things get interesting. The questline actually gives you the task to renovate another sanctuary. Said new sanctuary isn't static either, as you can upgrade it, not only having it transform in real time, but also getting an in-universe explanation for it. That's swell. Also, the questline actually gives you the choice to kill a major character, and if you don't, he doesn't just get deleted from the game, no, he actually reappears in the new sanctuary and gets new things to do and say. Truly inspired stuff, I know. After the companions, I would have never suspected this. And I hear you wonder, could it get any better than this? Well, yes it can, dear viewer, as there are actually 2 new members that join up after a while. Okay, they're unnamed and don't really have much of a character, but this is a good step in the right direction. It almost feels like entirely different writing teams working on these factions. And now I've saved the best for last, the Thieves Guild. The least static faction in the entire game, I'd say. Once we survive what's likely the worst introduction to a faction in the game, the hunt is on. In all seriousness though, I don't get why Bethesda made Brynjolf force greet the player in such a bizarre way. I don't know which one is worse. Brynjolf force greeting someone just wandering around the marketplace, or Ayla force greeting you in the middle of nowhere and criticizing you for possibly not aiding in a fight you never saw happen in the first place. I suppose that second one is worse by itself, but Brynjolf's force greet likely got preceded by both Maul and the gate guard already force greeting you, so pick your poison, I'd say. Then you head to the Red Way, a sewer dungeon filled with more colorful characters. As to why exactly these are here, I'd say because even if you never wanted to visit the place out of your own interest, the main quest forces you to go down there anyway, so it got that extra shiny polishing treatment. Fun fact, one of the first characters you can encounter here is the aforementioned Yunan Blackskeever, of whom Attis stole his outfit. And when you finally get to the faction's headquarters proper, you'll find it to be more lively than expected. At this moment in time, there will be 13 members you can interact with. And just like the Brotherhood, the guild has fallen on hard times, though not as severely. After wrapping up this story, only one guild member has to die, and that is the current guild master, Mercer Frey. There can be other fatalities, but those are all optional. In fact, there is one person that can optionally die, but if he lives, he becomes a fence for the guild. In fact, 2 more people will become available as fences by doing the questline. And this all happens organically, because these normal city folk are involved with the quests. I know, once again, such a weird concept, right? Involving NPCs in other quests? Crazy. But we're not stopping yet. The Thieves Guild also has optional fences that can be unlocked by completing these special missions the player receives by doing small Radiant quest activities. Now yes, these Radiant quests are a bit tedious, especially since you can choose their location, but the special quests they unlock are kinda worth it. In turn, the completion of these quests grants you additional upgrade. 4 new merchants will appear with unique shops down in the Red Way, and 2 unique characters will join up with the guild. They even have actual personalities and actual proper dialogue that reacts to certain quests being active, as if they were always there from the start. For those keeping track, that's an additional 6 NPCs that can be unlocked, netting a total of 18 inhabitants of the guild HQ. And besides people, completion of the Radiant side jobs also adds small prizes to the guild hall, and you can even find specific artifacts throughout the questline that can also be presented here. I love little touches like that. And yeah, with additional unlockables in both the form of objects and NPCs with character, as well as justification for some actions, a bit of choice and collectibles in the questline, I think that Thieves Guild sets a golden standard for how not to have a static faction. Or at least it does so for Skyrim factions, where the pickings are quite slim. I do have to add that I'm pretty sure the Thieves Guild got special treatment here due to them being connected to the main quest. I mean, there's even a random character during the main quest that you can find and release, and he will show up at the guild hall and react to you based on how you treated him back in the main quest. I didn't even count him before, so add him as well. But to me, if you want to find out how much of a special treatment this location got, it's as simple as looking at the unique voice actors involved. The companions have 1 unique voice actor. For Godlike, the college has 2. For Mirabelle and Ancano, weirdly enough, Savos uses a generic one. The Dark Brotherhood also has 2, one for Astrid and one for Nazir. Though if you want to count supporting characters, you could also count Amon Montier, Cicero and the Emperor among those. And the Dor and Lucien de la Chance's Ghost if you really want, but the same thing goes for the Augur of Dunlin. But the Thieves Guild has all of its higher-ups, with the exception of Tonilia, have a unique voice. Vex, Delvin, Brynjolf and Mercer all have unique voices, and I think that gives it away as a bit of a dev favorite, or at least as something that got the most time to cook in the oven. Ah, what the heck, while I'm at it, I might as well just cover the DLC factions as well, right? It's easy, as they're both on opposite sides of the spectrum. The Volkihar vampire clan does basically everything I've talked about wrong, in a similar vein to the companions. You start off with 13 members of the faction, but by the end, 3 of them will have perished. One, which I neglect to count, only appears for a brief moment at the very first appearance of the castle, and I also won't count the dogs. If you wanna count Dexion and Serana as extra additions, then I'll gladly add 2 people to the pool, but it still doesn't really mean much. No new recruits ever get added, nothing really happens with the vampires after completion of the main quest, and none of the Radiant quests ever lead to something more interesting like the Thieves Guild quest. I also find it stupid that none of the other vampires that are part of the clan ever get mentioned, like Lokil or Malkus. Here's another fun fact for you, Malkus is the only vampiric orc in the entire game. Despite this, Bethesda neglected to use the specifically designed vampire orc eyes on him. On a related note, there are these 2 orc bandits that, while not vampiric, do have vampiric eyes, which, if anything, shows I've looked way too much into design over the years. And speaking of weird choices, I forgot to mention this during the Thieves Guild segment, but remember my note on the weird racial choices made? Well, remember this loading screen? Yeah, despite even all the discrimination people will tell you about, there isn't a single Khajiit to be found in the Thieves Guild. Nor are there any Argonians. The Volkihar vampire clan doesn't have any beast race representation either, which is sad since vampiric beast races aren't used anywhere at all, but they do have cool visual designs. Getting back to the clan though, there's only a single notable addition that can be made to the location, and that's clearing rubble from a passageway, giving you easier access to the courtyard. That's cool I guess, but kinda lame when comparing it to their rivals, the Dawnguard. Now, while Castle Volkihar has been inhabited for ages, Fort Dawnguard has long stood abandoned, with Isran, the founder of this new Dawnguard incarnation, just having started the repairs. The cool thing is, while you play through the questline, you can actively see both the fort and the faction evolve. When first encountered, the Dawnguard basically consists of just 3 members, Durek, Selen and Isran. Newcomer Agmir will sign on the same time as you, and the game never even uses him as emotional bait for anything. I mean, he doesn't have any plot relevance whatsoever, but that can also be a good thing, right? While you are out doing quests, the fort will gain more equipment on the inside, as well as more fortifications on the outside. With these fortifications come new outside patrols as well. You've got Vori, Tilde, Olrod and Mogrel. Mogrel is especially weird since not only would that name get reused for another orc in Dragonborn, but this Mogrel is also the only blonde orc in the whole of Skyrim, and that's counting all the generic ones as well. The design philosophy for Skyrim would indicate that orcs have anywhere from dark black to light brown hair, but nothing lighter, and clearly someone didn't get that memo here. Still, I suppose anything is a step up from Oblivion and its purple haired orcs. Speaking of orcs though, the only other one in the faction, Durek, has a default face, which is quite odd and weirdly enough a problem that pops up multiple times throughout the DLC. And while we're on the topic, if we don't count Malkus, then the Dawnguard is the only faction in Skyrim besides the College of Winterhold to have an orc member. Weird, huh? It's kinda on the same level as when you realize that of all the cities, only Markarth has orcish inhabitants. But to get back on track, you as a player will get the chance to recruit 3 unique members yourself: Florentius Banius, Gunmore and Serene Gerard. Belival and Ingjord are the last 2 members to join up here in my list, and while they're not super developed, they are some cool looking characters with some flavor to them at the very least. Another interesting oddity with the Dawnguard questline is that a camp of refugees will also appear outside the fort. They don't really have a purpose and all the males have a default face, but their inclusion is kind of cool at the very least, even if they appear unfinished. Can you just imagine this sprawling refugee camp popping up naturally outside the fort? And yeah, I guess that brings things to an end here. If I were to recap, I'd say that I appreciate a faction that feels lively, or just has some evolving elements at the very least. The companions were just a bare bones concept that, while having a cool background, ultimately does nothing with it and just kinda falls flat. The college kinda has the same problem, as I don't wanna blame its lacking content on all the cuts, though they probably have a minor role in the overall feel at the very least. The Volkihar vampires are similarly just a bit undercooked, and I don't think it has anything to do with content cuts. It just seems that the Dawnguard portion of the questline got all the love and attention. The Dawnguard and the Dark Brotherhood both have a more natural evolution planned out, based on the story, with locations changing and people joining up or dying, while the Thieves Guild has a more unlockable evolution, with optional content hidden behind side quests and having more of a scavenger hunt side quest for physical changes in the base. I think both options are viable, and they can both work if executed properly, and with time. But I feel like every faction should have been this dynamic, and not just a few things of a few factions. And while this has been both a look at faction logic as well as a bit of a cosmetical look at their wrongdoings, I feel like I need to end on one last bizarre note that you might have missed. Serana and Valerica have the exact same face, except Valerica has a different skin texture and different eyes. Couple of clicks and voila. Ah, the wonders of game design. See you sometime in the future.